House on the Edge of the Park is a sick, twisted, sadistic, borderline misogynistic film that I actually really, really like. I like this movie a lot. It's a great flick. It's outstanding Euro sleaze. Let's discuss. Alright, so House on the Edge of the Park essentially exists because someone saw The Last House on the Left. I mean, this is The Last House on the Left ripoff. But it's a good one. And it's a good one mostly because of David Hess and Ruggero Deodato. So, essentially what happened was Ruggero Deodato was coming off the massive success, but massive controversy of Cannibal Holocaust. I mean, he narrowly avoided jail time because of that movie, for God's sake. And David Hess was struggling to get work because it was beyond typecasting. It was stereotype, like, he's talked about how people were legitimately scared of him after seeing Last House on the Left because Last House on the Left is such a visceral movie. It feels so real. People just assumed he was naturally like that. He's told stories about being on the subway in New York and people giving him room, like being scared of him. You think about how messed up New York was in the 70s. That's pretty damn bad. So it's like David Hess is scaring gangsters and shit. So Hess was essentially willing to do effectively a straight rip-off of his own movie. But the thing is that the movie was built around him. He apparently owned like 50% of the rights. He rewrote most of his own dialogue. So this is basically a one-man show for David Hess. Not to say there aren't other talented people involved. There absolutely are. I mean, the writers, if you look through the guys who wrote this, they also wrote Cannibal Holocaust for Deodato. But they had their names on some pretty major Italian properties. Nazi Love Camp, Jungle Holocaust, Phantom of Death. They were New York Ripper and Devilfish, weirdly, which is one of the worst Jaws remakes. They must have been asleep with a switch on that one. Either that or the script was mangled by the director, I'm not sure. But yeah, the writers, the director, the guy who did the score also did the score for Cannibal Holocaust, and he kind of takes the same approach here where he plays beautiful music over something awful happening, like in Cannibal Holocaust. So the cast also is a very good, it's a weird mixed bag of Italian names, but it's people that if you watch Euro sleaze, you watch Italian horror, you'll recognize someone like this guy from Tenebrae's in this, Lorraine DeSalle and Giovanni Lombardo Radice are in this after working together on Cannibal Ferox, which ironically is a ripoff of Cannibal Holocaust. But Annie Bella's in this, and I actually didn't know who she was, but I noticed looking at the posters for this movie that her name would usually be featured very prominently on the poster, and I was like, was she famous or something in the 70s? She did porn. She did porn. That's what she was known for. She was a softcore. She did some of the Emmanuel movies. But she's very beautiful, and she's not a bad actress. Most of the acting in this movie is solid. It's not amazing, but it's solid. It kind of has that Last House on the Left vibe of the actors are just kind of being allowed to be themselves. And it works. It works. Like I said, I like everything about this movie. I think that Deodato has said that he was a little uncomfortable with the violence, and this is a movie that makes you squirm. House on the Edge of the Park is a fucked up movie. It's one of the few movies I can honestly say actually made me uncomfortable watching it, which I like. I like it when a movie challenges me, and it's because this movie unabashedly the lead is a villain. Just there's no that saying there are no heroes. There's no hero in this movie. It's a bad guy doing bad things to mostly obnoxious people. But David Hess is such a charismatic guy that you don't really mind that you're following him. He's just really good in this role. And he's playing a guy named Alex. His buddy Ricky, played by Giovanni Lombardo Radice. Italy's whipping boy, that's how he describes himself, because awful things tended to happen to him in Italian movies. He was in Cannibal Ferox, City of the Living Dead for Fulci, this, and Stage Fright are kind of his big four. That's what he's best known for. And this is my favorite of the four. And, so he and Alex and Ricky are the two lead characters. And in the very beginning of this movie, Alex is riding through New York City, and he sees this girl, and he apparently saw her at a nightclub earlier that night, and it doesn't even seem like he was following her. It just seems like he notices her. And he essentially runs her off the road and rapes her to death, like cold open. That's the beginning of this movie, and it's shot in these weird, like, quick edits, which I think kind of represents probably the way Alex would remember that, because he says, it's said later that he just sort of lost control of himself. And he would probably remember that just as a series of flashes, like, wow, what the hell did I do last night? because the guy doesn't have much of a conscience. It's not like he's gonna feel bad about it, but he has enough self-control to where he can stay out of prison. And he works at this garage where they trade in stolen automobiles, stolen auto parts. And he talks about, he brags about intimidating this cop that was trying to, search the place. And Ricky's really impressed with him. And Alex and Ricky, it's a little hard to tell exactly how long they've known each other. And I think that's because this was not a very ambitious script. Like I said, this is basically a movie that exists because Last House on the Left existed. And in Europe, they were ripping off Last House on the Left quite a bit, actually. Night Train Murders was a rip-off of Last House on the Left. And a lot of them even called themselves Last House on the Left Part 2 because, copyright laws are apparently really lenient in Europe. But so the writers, I don't think, put a whole lot of effort into this movie, but essentially what this movie does is it stretches the first half of The Last House on the Left almost to a complete film and then crams the revenge element into the last few minutes. But it works mostly because David Hess and Deodato are doing their job very well, even though Deodato didn't particularly like the material. He thought it went a little too far. And, apparently he didn't like having to shoot in the city. He was still on his jungle kick with a Jungle Holocaust and Cannibal Holocaust. So, he was essentially just kind of being hired, but he does it very well. And what he does so well is he just shoots the movie very passively. There'll be a group shot and there'll just be a woman that's been forced to strip nude standing off in a corner like it's all right. It's not telling you how to feel about this. And I think that that's cool because it feels like this is the way Alex would see this. He would see himself as the hero of the story. Yeah, because again, the guy has next to no conscience. So he wouldn't see himself as a villain, and I think that that's really cool, and that's what's so interesting about this movie, because it's actually really rare that you get a movie where the lead is a villain and there's not really anyone countering that. There's not a hero. I mean, even in Hannibal, there's Clarice Starling. Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer obviously did, and a few serial killer movies, but those are usually true stories. It's rare to see one that isn't a true story where it's just all about the killer. And Alex isn't even really a killer. He's more just a serial rapist, and he killed one girl. It seems like that was the only one he did. And that girl was actually played by David Hess's real-life wife at the time. I don't know if they're still married afterward, but she only acted twice, and that was one of them, so that's a hell of a cinematic legacy. But, Hess and Hess's character and Radice's character, Alex and Ricky, are hanging out in this garage, and this rich couple rolls in. It's Lorraine DeSalle and it says it's her husband, but I didn't get the vibe that they were married. I think that might be like a miscommunication or something. Anyway, this movie was shot in Italy. Like, the whole New York thing was just a gimmick that a lot of Italian movies did, where they would film for a day, or maybe not even that, in New York City, just to book in the movie like Cannibal Holocaust did, or Fulci's Zombie 2. And this was shot in Italy. So it's an Italian cast and David Hess. But so this rich couple, Lorraine DeSalle and her guy, roll in, and they're like, car's not acting right. And Hess is like, well, that's too fucking bad because I'm on my way out. And, rich guy just starts rolling out money. I'll give you whatever you want. And Ricky's like, oh, I can fix it. I can fix the car's good. And Ricky is slow. I don't think he would count as autistic. I think he would just have a low IQ, like Forrest Gump kind of. Like, he wouldn't be handicapped, he's just slow. But Ricky's obviously very eager to prove himself, and he starts fiddling with the car, and Alex kind of light hits on Lorraine DeSalle's character. And then Ricky's like, I got it fixed! And David Hess is like, oh, it's too late to go out. He keeps saying boogie. He's like, it's too late to go out and boogie now. Very late 70s, early 80s. And what's funny about that is it seems like it only took Ricky 45 seconds to fix the car. I mean, I assume that this is just a bad edit, and there was supposed to be a cut there to suggest time had passed. Because it's like, oh, it's the difference of 72 seconds. I guess we're not going out. That's sort of ridiculous. Not a movie without flaws. But then Alex kind of invites himself along with the rich couple who are on their way to this kind of, they call it a get-together, and he keeps calling it a party, and he says, well, it'll be a party when I get there. So they all go to this rich house, which was apparently supposed to be modeled after the Sharon Tate's house, where the Manson family murders were committed, but I don't really know what the Tate house looked like. So, I just don't know. But that's a rumor, is that it was supposed to look like the Tate house. So Alex and them all get there, And it's just a few people just kind of hanging out, and they're all these kind of up their own ass rich people just sitting around. It's so terribly boring. Like, and Ricky kind of immediately starts to make a fool of himself. He gets all hyper, starts drinking, starts dancing, takes off his shirt. He's flirting hardcore with Lorraine DeSalle, and like I said, he literally starts taking off his clothes. And in the meantime, Alex focuses in on Annie Belle's character. Like, so David Hess is really going after her hard, and like she's being a massive prick tease with him. Like, she keeps flirting with him and then just saying, I'm done. So he goes out and tells Ricky to stop acting like an idiot, basically. And so they just sit down and play poker while David Hess follows Annie Belle upstairs. And she's in the shower and they're like flirting, and they strip naked, and then she basically tells him, all right, bye, and just leaves him there. It's like, bitch. So he goes downstairs, pissed at this point, obviously, and Ricky is getting his ass kicked at poker. And after watching for a few minutes, the David Hess character figures out they're cheating him. So he just kind of says, deal a straight game or else. And Ricky's kind of pissed off, and this starts a big fight, and dude who seems to own the house is being a condescending prick, but his buddy, who's like a rageaholic, just starts this big fight and gets his ass kicked. He can't fight worth shit. David Hess is just owning him. Then David Hess puts his razor to his neck. They do this whole thing where he's always carrying a straight razor, and now he's in charge. And he just like strips off the black woman's clothes in front of everyone, and just abuse. Like, that's most of what the middle of this movie is just Alex abusing these people. And Annie Belle in particular is kind of into it, while Lorraine DeSalle is absolutely terrified. And Ricky's in the middle, and Giovanni Lombardo Radice, for the most part, does a good job in this movie. And you may have thought to yourself, man, that guy is skinny. Yeah, he was very skinny. He had a cocaine problem at the time and an eating disorder, so yeah, he was very thin in this movie. But he plays the role well, though. He's got this weird kind of nervous energy about him, and it's believable both that he's amused by the violence, but that he's also uncomfortable with it. It seems like it's when it kind of gets into Class A felony levels of violence that he kind of pulls back. It's like he doesn't want anybody to get killed. He doesn't want anyone to get raped. He's okay with the girls being humiliated, their clothes being torn off, but like actual sexual full-on violence he's not okay with. But Alex is just kind of trying to control the room, and David Hess, you can kind of tell that in between this and The Last House on the Left, because he did a lot of improvising on Last House on the Left too, that he was probably just kind of a dick in real life. And I love David Hess. I'm a huge fan. I was very sad to hear when he died. I think his last movie ended up being Smash Cut. They're actually trying to make a sequel to this when he died. I think his death kind of killed the movie. But, it seems to come very naturally to him. Like, there's one scene where Lorraine DeSalle is sitting on the couch, and David Hess just walks up and shoves her out of the way so he can sit on it. It's like, just stuff like that where it just seems like he's just kind of a bully in real life, maybe. But again, he's very good in this movie. And Hess and Radice are the two that carry this movie. The victims are just victims. Like, the guy who thinks he's tough is kind of decent, but he's incapacitated really fast. David Hess just beats the dog shit out of him, throws him in a swimming pool, pisses on him, then ties him up, and he's pretty much done for the bulk of the movie. Yeah, dude who owns the house, David Hess gets pissed off at him and just bangs his face against the table over and over again. His face is all beat to shit after that. And that kind of takes the fight out of him, and he keeps going for this drawer. He's like, I keep the best tapes in this drawer. And he can't ever quite get to it. You find out why at the end of the movie. The black woman, it's lightly implied that David Hess's character is a racist, so he's not really that interested in her. Like, he humiliates her a little bit, and he calls her Roots, which, Roots being that show, miniseries in the 70s, and then they brought it back maybe 2 or 3 years ago about a slave's life in Confederate South. And so it's implied that he's kind of a racist, so she's kind of a blind spot. He's not that interested in her. But Ricky is bonding with Lorraine DeSalle, and Lorraine DeSalle is this kind of Initially, I think she just thought that, well, he's the nicer of the two, so maybe I should buddy up with him and he'll maybe protect me or convince his psychotic buddy to leave. But she gets Stockholm syndrome pretty hardcore in this movie because she makes a run for it and Ricky stops her. But then Ricky like tosses his broken bottle that Alex had handed him when she escaped because he just bring the bitch back or whatever he says. So yeah, she's like, I guess he's nice now, and they go and they just bang in the backyard. And apparently during that sex scene, Lorraine DeSalle was really uncomfortable with the nudity for some reason. And I say for some reason because she's been naked in other movies, and in this movie her dress is nothing. Like her tits fall out every time she moves. But supposedly she was just like really uncomfortable during the sex scene and kept trying to hide behind Giovanni Lombardo Radice, like put him between her and the camera, and Ruggero Deodato was getting pissed off, like, I can't see her, get out of the way. But so they go out and bang, and then this little tiny girl, good God, this girl looks like she's 14. I mean, she had to, I assume she had to be at least 18, but she shows up to the party, and her relationship, like I said, she just looks so young. I wasn't really clear on how she's connected to these people. But, and they say she's a virgin, too. And it's so funny when Alex finds out she's a virgin. It's like, your boyfriend's a real asshole. Well, don't worry. Alex will fix that. He's just such a great villain, and like I said, every move that Hess makes, like in an earlier scene where David Hess tries to force his friend to rape Lorraine DeSalle, and he's not okay. Like Ricky's like, I can't do it. I'm not enjoying this. This is fucked up. And that's because he said, just do it, and he says, shut up, you asshole. I think he says, shut up, you asshole. And David Hess is kind of like, did you call me an asshole? Like, my best friend. Yeah. And he has this mini meltdown over it, and he starts walking around the party and just goes, bah! Like just making faces at people. It's a fantastic character. Like, this movie lives and dies really with David Hess. But I say that if it didn't have a strong director, then it could have just been David Hess throwing a fit in a room. Like, Deodato does handle this well. He gets the coverage, and again, this weird passive quality to the violence, where he's not like when something terrible is happening, Deodato just kind of sits the camera there and lets it happen. It's a very passive, interesting thing, and it's also, this movie is a very quiet movie. It's a very quiet movie. There's not a lot of score here. They listen to music a few times, and like that damn song, "Do It to Me Much More." They play that old disco song. They play that a few times, but generally it's a very quiet movie. And again, that just adds to this sense of just being in the room watching this awful thing happen. So, I think that in between Deodato and Hess, it just kind of this perfect storm of good ideas were happening and elevated this movie that should have been instantly forgettable Euro sleaze, just get thrown on the heap with the other Last House on the Left trash remakes that basically remakes, rip-offs, and it elevates it to something a lot higher. And this is a movie that's kind of on the rare side, but it is a cult classic. I'm wearing my House on the Edge of the Park t-shirt, and it deserves it. It's very good. I guess one more piece of trivia, when Alex finally does take Annie Bell's character upstairs to rape her, David Hess has bragged and said that he actually had sex with her during that. I don't know, maybe possible. The way it's shot, it doesn't really look like it, but they could have had to cut some stuff. So, this is, I don't think there is an R-rated cut of this movie. There was a BBC cut that cut like 10 minutes out of it, but I don't know if they ever even bothered getting an R rating. Every solid media release of this is unrated, and you can actually watch the movie very easily. It's free on YouTube right now. But the DVD and the Blu-ray are both out of print and really expensive. Luckily, I got the DVD. I got it in a 3-pack with Bava's Delirium and a movie that Beyond the Darkness, which is I don't like Joe D'Amato movies. It was a Joe D'Amato movie. But yeah, I think this is a great movie, and it all culminates in the twist at the end. And the twist at the end is like, it's all right. I accept it. I think that the actors don't quite sell it, but particularly the guy who's supposed to own the house, but it works. And I mean, that's after the scene where Alex has just taken the little tiny underage looking girl, stripped her naked, and just cut her to ribbons with a razor, but still not killing her. That's the thing, is he's not trying to kill her. It's light cuts. It's just things that would hurt like hell. And like, he scarred this poor girl, this virgin, for life. She's never going to be able to take off her clothes in front of someone without explaining why she has these long cuts all down her chest. And while he's doing it, it's even creepier because he's singing this song that David Hess apparently made up for the movie, Cindy, oh Cindy, don't let me down. Like, this is a hard movie to watch. It's a brutal movie. And then, again, the third act, obviously, and heavy spoilers from here on out, but I am going to talk about the ending, where it's finally revealed that the girl Alex killed in the park, and that's the only mention of a park in this entire movie. There's House on the Edge of the Park is a made-up title, because they only say that he raped and killed the girl near the park. There's no mention that this house is near the park. I never saw a park anywhere near the damn house. But yeah, so it turns out that the girl he raped and killed at the beginning was the guy who owns the house's sister, and this whole thing was a setup, and he basically brought Alex into the party to piss him off, which is why he's being such a dick at the beginning, to say that these hoodlums broke in and they had to defend themselves. But, Alex has this meltdown when Ricky tries to stop him, because Alex is basically in a mode at this point. It's like, I think I'm just going to kill everybody. I mean, really, he couldn't. He has to kill them all at this point. They know his name, his face, and where he works. The cops aren't going to have to look very hard to find him. And Ricky kind of tries to stop him, and Alex flicks it out and cuts him and just opens his chest up. And Alex, again, David Hess plays this very well, where he has this whole meltdown. He starts crying, and he's like, nah, it's just you. Why'd you have to turn against me? Nah, it's their fault. I'll show them all. But by then, dude who owns the house has finally gotten to that drawer with the gun. And he shoots Alex, and then he shoots Alex in the dick. And the way they play that, where David Hess is just like, in super slow motion, it's like, yeah, that would hurt like a bitch. And then he falls in the pool, and they untie a guy that Alex threw in the pool at the beginning, and that he kind of does this whole revenge thing where he does the same thing to Alex that Alex did to him, where he just pretends like he's going to help him, throws him the hell back in the pool. And Annie Bell, I guess, presumably for revenge for rape, even though she ended up looking like she kind of enjoyed it towards the end, but she gets the gun and she gets to shoot him too. And they just leave his ass in the pool. The poor mutilated girl, they check on her, and Lorraine DeSalle convinces them not to kill Ricky, so Giovanni Lombardo Radice is spared. But yeah, that's the whole movie. It's a good movie. I like this movie a lot. I like the kind of no-holds-barred approach. I think Deodato was genuinely, at least for a period in his career, a fearless filmmaker. He would show whatever. And, he had this hot streak, because most of his career was kind of just a mid-tier Italian director. Before Jungle Holocaust and after House on the Edge of the Park, there's really not a lot in his resume. I've seen a lot of his movies. I saw Phantom of Death with Donald Pleasance, the giallo he did in the late 80s. Saw The Washing Machine, which is a giallo / softcore porno. I've seen a few of his other movies. But yeah, he just hit this hot streak. Like, he had artistic inspiration for these 3 movies. And they're not quite in a row, because there are 2 movies between Jungle Holocaust and Cannibal Holocaust. One's a drama, and another one's an action movie. Neither one looked interesting to me. But, excepting for those 2, Jungle Holocaust, Cannibal Holocaust, and House on the Edge of the Park, were basically in a row, and they were his 3 classics there. And they are classics. They're movies that are going to be remembered for a good long while to come. And I think House on the Edge of the Park is a great movie. It is way better than it has any right to be. And it is criminal that David Hess never had a real film career. He was a very successful songwriter, not necessarily musician, but he was a very successful songwriter. But as far as acting, he would do something, and then a couple years would pass, and he'd do something. Like, he was in one episode of The A-Team. He was in a few really low-budget horror movies in the 2000s right before he died. He was in a few movies in Europe in the late 70s. He was in Swamp Thing for Wes Craven in the early 80s. But generally, he didn't get a lot of work. But I think that this is one of the best unsung classics of the genre, because people that remember it love it, but it's just sort of a rare movie, and not a lot of people talk about it. They should. But yeah, that's Ruggero Deodato's House on the Edge of the Park, starring David Hess. That's all I got to say. Goodbye.